Something I like to do on this channel is show off the work of smaller devs making fighting game content, whether it be mods or full-on new games. And there's a game I've had my eye on for a while that has had an alpha release recently, and it looks extremely promising. The game boasts a great roster that will massively expand in the future, with a variety of playstyles and fun combo routes for each character. It also tackles a problem with modern fighting games I don't see a lot of AAA games tackle, let alone indie games, and that's single-player modes. The game I'm talking about is Duels of Fortune. The game has been everything I wanted it to be so far, so I'd like to boost the attention this game is getting. Without further ado, let's get into it. Duels of Fortune is an indie fighting game first released in alpha on September 16th of this year. Something to keep in mind as we go through this is that this game was primarily made by two people, Ben Soares and Caleb O'Halloran. This game is so comprehensive and detailed even in its first alpha that it's hard to believe just two people worked on it, but it goes to show the passion they had for the project. The first thing you'll probably notice is the visual style the game has, and I'm a big fan. It's a 2.5D fighter, but all the characters are very bright and colorful. It almost has a cartoon or comic book aesthetic to it, which I think really fits the world and the characters. The UI is also very sleek, and really fits the style of everything else. The animations are sleek with lots of added smears for dramatic effect, which just ties everything together. But I'm not really great at talking about how games look, let's talk about how the game plays. The game is a 4, technically 5-button fighter in the same vein as Marvel 3, or more closely, Power Rangers Battle for the Grid. Unlike those games though, this is strictly a 1v1 game. The basic movement is fairly simple, but does have a very interesting quirk I haven't seen in other games. You have full control over your jump in the air, allowing you to do some crazy cross-ups. Some aerials lock your momentum though, so it's worth keeping that in mind. While command normals exist, there are no special move inputs. Instead, your fourth attack button, S, controls these attacks. Every character has a good variety of specials, both airborne and grounded. You also have a super meter that stocks up to 2 bars and allows you to use one of your character's 2 supers. Combos in this game are very interesting too. You have a simple combo beat, being able to cancel normals into stronger ones and then into specials and supers. But what makes this game unique is its focus on OTG setups. Most attacks hit off the ground, allowing you to extend off of most knockdowns. I haven't really fully mastered the system yet, but it does seem like the system is solid in terms of infinites. It does limit the amount of times you can jump cancel in a combo, for example, which means while you can do some really crazy stuff, you can't just keep looping the same attacks. If things get tough, you can burst, which can be used defensively for a get-out-of-jail-free card, but also offensively to allow otherwise impossible loops. This system is really freeform, so it's easy to hop in and lab things out as you play. There are a few gripes I have with the systems, but they really didn't come into play as much as I learned the game more. Still, I wanted to mention them so new players know what to expect. The first part is that almost every move is pretty unsafe on whiff. It doesn't matter too much once you're used to it, but trying to throw out pokes on a patient opponent is going to open you up. That doesn't mean that neutral isn't important, but you really want to make sure your melee hits connect or rely on ranged options. The other thing that took getting used to is that combo timings can feel a bit strange, especially on slower characters. The game has cancels, so it's not about tight links, but sometimes you try to cancel out and nothing will seem to happen. According to the devs, this is because implementing an input buffer wasn't possible with their engine implementation. It really doesn't end up being as bad as it sounds though, you just have to get used to your character's timings to know when you can cancel, and otherwise the game is still very forgiving. Of course, a game is only as good as its characters, so let's take a look. The roster currently contains 11 characters, all of whom are super unique and wacky and fill their own unique role in the cast. Clyde Brightstar is the main character and has an aggressive boxing playstyle. While he suffers at range, he has great speed and damage up close, as well as a unique dash that lets him pass through opponents for devious side switch attacks. His doppelganger Blackheart has a similar affinity for powerful mix-ups, but does so through mind games rather than speed. Hurtbox shifting, ambiguous attacks, a grab super that can go airborne, and ways to punish mistakes at basically any range. Blackheart is the perfect character if you like to keep your opponent guessing. Annie DeSteel is the classic zoner character. She's got a wide variety of projectiles and traps to make her difficult to approach, while also having great aerial control with her jet boots to make her hard to pin down. Shoto Kanji is Shotokan, you get the idea. This is the standard beginner archetype everyone knows and loves. Shoto handles things a little differently though, with arcing, bouncing fireballs, uppercuts you can combo after, multiple types of flying kicks, and the powerful electric punch Smash players know Shotos for. Red Maxwell is a hard-hitting brawler and a rage-fueled powerhouse. Once he gets in, he stays in with a powerful mix-up-filled offense, benefited even more by his unique ability to enhance his specials. Sir Rattlebone is a skeletal sword fighter who takes advantage of his great range to dominate neutral. His big buttons and arcing projectiles mean the opponent has to respect him a lot when they're in his grasp. Rattlebone's eternal rival, Captain Shiverskull, is a ghostly pirate with insane aggression. While his mix-ups aren't as good as other close-ranged characters, his ability to get in and relentlessly barrage from his crew means that he gets to force his opponents to block for a long time and capitalize on their eventual mistakes. Callow Man is a powerful grappler if you couldn't tell by his lack of legs. He's got a lot of powerful attacks to do big damage and knockdown, letting him set up taunts to fill up his grab meter for even more ludicrous damage. Doodle is a rule-breaking stickman who takes on an archetype not really seen in games without special move inputs. His powerful attacks only reach their full potential when paired with charge specials, requiring the use of holding the opposite direction before activation. One of his supers lets him break the rule again and do specials without charge, allowing for some unstoppable techniques. Sylvan Blackjack is the game's antagonist and takes on a very unique zoning playstyle. He can take time to search his deck or just cheat in some aces, unlocking an array of brutal projectiles. With every ace in the deck, he enters a super form, opening up some huge and fast combo tools, as well as one of the strongest supers in the game. The game's final character, Error CS1501, is actually hidden and requires you to hold start while hovering over the random button. While they are a legitimate character and an important part of the roster, they are also by far the weirdest character, which says a lot. Stuck in an endless T-pose, Error's limbs contort to cover massive distance. Their bizarre nature messes with the logic of the game itself, allowing them to fly freely and even open up holes in the ground for some incredibly oppressive attacks. The roster is planned to essentially triple in the future, so I'm very excited to see what other characters show up next. Plenty of other characters were shown in earlier development builds, so I really hope we get to see them as the game progresses. While of course you can't have a fighting game without the characters, the modes you have to play them in is also a big deal. Now that we're at this point, let me rip off the biggest band-aid, the hardest sell with this game. This game doesn't have any sort of online play, nor are there plans to implement any. It is a big disappointment, and it is a significant issue. But I also don't think it's a complete deal breaker. Parsec is becoming more and more common, and while it's not always ideal, it certainly makes the game at least accessible in that way. But with that limit, the question becomes, what does the game provide if you don't want to set up Parsec? If you just want to play the game to try out its modes on your own? Well, of course, you can play versus matches against the AI. This has a variety of options for time, rounds, etc., but also has an interesting option I haven't seen in any traditional fighters, the ability to enable stage hazards. Some of these are fairly simple, like adding ringouts or making things fall from the sky, but some of these completely change the game by adding items, enemies, or sometimes even straight up platforms. Every stage is a blast to see what they came up for. Other than that though, you have all the standard fighting game modes. Training mode is fairly basic but has everything you need. Quick reset, damage display, resources refreshing, etc. There's not much to say, it's a training mode and it works. Arcade mode on the other hand is very cool. It has this tournament aesthetic, starting with a huge roster of characters and narrowing it down with each win you get. Not all the characters shown on the board are playable or even possible opponents, but it's a cool way to make you feel like you're actually going through pools. There's even a boss at the end with a ton of cool attacks, as well as some secrets along the way. Not only that, but midway through arcade mode, you get to play a minigame. The minigames do have their own section too, and there's a huge variety. Some minigames have you face off against hordes of enemies, some of them have you destroy stuff, race to the finish, hit a ball around. There's really a ton to do here. It's an awesome distraction that I had a blast messing around with, especially the ones where you fight a horde of enemies. It's a lot of fun to figure out what works best against each type. While it's nice to have some distractions, sometimes you want to feel like you're making progress, and there's plenty of that to be made too. Combo trials exist for every character and lets you get the ins and outs of the mechanics down pat. There's some really tricky and cool trials here, and they'll take a long time to master. The real meat of the game, however, at least in this early access build, is the mission mode. These missions are very similar to the event matches from Smash Bros. They all pit you in a match, but with some sort of modifier active. Some of these are fairly simple, like adding a new stage hazard or messing with the physics, but some of these completely change the game, such as requiring you to do something other than fight the opponent, or even put you in a position where you're playing as a character you can't normally play as. Every few stages you'll unlock a boss stage, which lets you fight a classic arcade-style boss. These fights can be merciless, but they're a ton of fun too. It's really interesting to test your skills against some of the ridiculous garbage thrown at you. I tried the first one on stream and it was...
No! Ah! Help me! Alright, I'm out. I am not out.
An experience to say the least. Once you beat these fights, you'll unlock the ability to refight bosses from the boss section, as well as unlock the ability to play as them in versus by enabling boss mode. This is a neat extra, and I really appreciate its addition. There's a few extra features here and there, like silly physics mode in the gallery, but that's really the gist of what the game has to offer. Overall, it ends up being a few hours of solid single-player content, with plenty of replay value. But here's the thing, this game isn't even close to done. Plenty more missions, trials, minigames, and bosses are on the way in the future, and even past that, the full game plans to have a story mode. I'm very interested to see how these relatively scattered characters end up tying into each other. And that's the gist of what Duels of Fortune has to offer right now. For the first released version, I'm extremely impressed. While yes, the lack of online is a letdown, the amount of content available from the first public build is more than most full-release fighting games. I really want this game to succeed. I've been very impressed with what the devs have so far. Please, go check them out. Give the game a shot if you haven't yet. It's truly a blast, and if you have a PC, you have no reason not to give it a fair shake. Even if you have nobody to play with, the single player is so much fun and very promising for the future of the game. When you do check it out, be sure to let me know what you think. All that said, I think that's all I have to say for this time, so thank you so much for watching. See you next time!